Hi everyone, thanks for joining us here on Mom Squad, a show where we talk all things parenting. I'm Maureen Kyle. And now that graduation ceremonies are over, kids are starting to think about the next phase of life. For those headed off to college, this will probably be the first time they are making financial decisions without parents looming over them. And how many times have you and your friends said, oh, I made so many mistakes with money in college? Or maybe you think back about how you didn't realize how those school loans would affect your life. Today, we talk with Mary Sasmaz, a professor at Case Western Reserve University who teaches one of the country's top financial literacy programs, and she shares what all college kids should know headed into school, and some of these lessons we should all put into practice for ourselves. So college, you see college students all the time, but you also teach the financial literacy program here. What do you think is the most important lesson? As somebody, let's say we have a high school senior out there who's graduated, what do you think they need to know heading into the first year of college?
Honestly, in the first year of college, and not even just talking about money, just talking about the first year of college, the biggest thing is being aware of your time. I think the students have the biggest challenge with just balancing their time. There's a lot. They're on their own now for the first time. They've got to think about, oh, I got to get up in the morning. Oh, I have to go to class. Oh, if I have a job, I got to go to work. I got to do my homework. And they're really responsible to do that themselves. And then on top of that, they've got to manage their own finances too.
Yeah. So. And I think a lot of kids, I know I did, so I'm sure kids now have bank accounts ahead of college.
Yes.
But now mom and dad aren't hovering over and telling them when to save and telling them how to spend. I feel like there's that freedom of, you know, now I can go out to the pizza place and, you know, pizza's on me, guys. You know, are those some of the mistakes that students make because they have that independence for the first time?
You know, sometimes it's funny. My nephew's actually about to go off to college, and one of the things that I tell him is consider a campus meal plan. And the reason being that all of you've got to look at the different plans that are available, but you can purchase a plan that has all of your meals incorporated. So you're not having to spend for every single meal. And college students sometimes eat a lot, right? They're at a young age, they're active, they need to eat to keep up their brain power so that they are able to learn in the classroom. So that's one way of cutting down on, say, delivery fees, because that didn't happen quite as much when I was in college, but now I see, you know, with the delivery services, there's fees for that, right? And so there are mistakes made with the constant purchase of not just of food, but of the delivery of the food. Yeah. Obviously, we have to eat. That's a need, right? So
that's interesting. I mean, I didn't even think of, like, talking to kids about the food, the necessities. What are some of the conversations? That's probably one that a parent should have before a kid goes off to school, but what other conversations do parents need to bring up about how to save and not blow the budget first semester?
You know, it's really hard, I think, for students who haven't already maybe had a job and were being allowed maybe during high school to spend the money freely. A lot of times this is that first time they can do it. So just maybe sitting down and having that conversation before about roughly how much it costs. How much does it cost to eat breakfast, lunch, dinner? How much does it cost to buy books, right? For your classes, how much does it cost for the clothing that you might need? And then maybe just thinking about ways to do that in a less expensive way. Obviously, there's not a lot of control over textbooks and things like that, but the university does a great job in negotiating those costs down with the publishers. But as far as food, as far as clothing, if you're living on campus, you're in a dorm. Your closet's not that huge. You don't need to fill your closet with, you know, a whole year's worth of clothing. You're really probably going to wear basically the same things every couple weeks. So there's no need to spend a lot of money on those kinds of things. Spend it on the needs. Kind of comes back to one of the basic financial planning ideas of need versus want. So if you can just talk to the kids about every time you make an expenditure, think about, is it something I need? or is it something I want? That's probably something we can apply to adult life too.
Oh yeah.
Right, and then a lot of our behavior with money kind of stems back to how, more like our psychological relationship with money. So that freedom that you mentioned, yes, sometimes that all of a sudden you start spending. Well, take some time, sit back after a month and say, oh, how much did I really spend? In my class, one of the things I like to have students do is just track their spending for a month and then actually categorize it and think about what they've spent their money on. And a lot of times it's online orders for clothing.
Yeah.
Right, and so that realization and recognizing it is probably the most helpful part. Once you realize it, then you can adjust how you behave. Right? But if you don't ever become aware of it, it can build up. So taking time to reflect, maybe after a semester, or really after a month. But when you go home, hey, mom, dad, you can actually ask questions like, hey, what did you spend the money on? No one likes to be asked what they spent their money on, right? But in the end, somebody's got to pay for that, right? Whether it's the student who's saved up from a summer job, or whether it's parents kind of funding that, or maybe even grandparents. So just starting to have those conversations, if they weren't already happening, can be helpful.
I feel like I need these conversations. I need to check again when you mention online ordering.
I have a tip I give students.
Please do.
After they do that sort of 1 month tracking for my class. One of the tips I say is if you think you're going to order something online, put it in the cart. Right? Put it in the cart, but don't check out. Then wait at least 3 days before you check out. And then when you check out, or before you check out, take a look, say, did I really want that, or do I really need that? You didn't need it for those 3 days, right? Because you could wait, let it sit in the cart. And then a lot of times the wish for that specific item has really passed. So just waiting 2 or 3 days, and that's probably advice for adults as well as for kids.
I have lots of abandoned carts all over the place, so yes, that is great advice.
It's kind of deferring that want to see if it's really a need.
So there's different situations in every family, and you kind of brought up, who's funding that bank account. And I know there's a lot of students out there that they work hard all summer to fill that bank account, and so they are the ones who are probably watching that money a lot more closely. Then there's some families where the parents or grandparents are able to put money into that account. But for those type of families that, mom and dad or grandma and grandpa have said, don't worry about it, I'll make sure you have money in your bank account, or I'll pay your credit card. Should there be some rules? What rules do you set out? And is that a good thing, or is that a bad thing to start out with when you're going to college?
It's kind of tricky because you're kind of getting into sort of just behavioral science and how teens will react differently to different levels of control, and especially when it comes back to money. So like you said, the student who's gone and worked all summer and filled their bank account so that they can use that for the semester, they're already aware of how much they have, and they're probably already paying attention to how much they're spending. The others that maybe are getting some funding, which I applaud the parents and grandparents who are able to do that, but maybe it's the conversations about, are you making wise choices? Versus, here is my rule for you. Because you're not there, you don't know exactly what they need to spend it on. And then the daily calls of, some people monitor credit cards. Oh, you spent $15 at Panera today, right? Like, getting that detailed is probably not going to improve the relationship that you might have to be able to talk about money with the student when they come home.
So it's a balance.
You got to find the right balance, and you got to find what works for that kid, right? So it's not a black and white answer. Some students will respond real easily and comfortably, and the more that you have those conversations, the easier it gets. Right? The first time's always a little weird.
And before we sat down, you and I were talking about, back in our day in college, where the credit card companies would set up a table at school and get kids signed up for credit card. They were handing out credit cards like crazy, but that's not the case anymore.
There are new rules in place that students can't really be there was the negative term of poached that used to be used. Well, while that can't happen, so students aren't signing up for credit cards as much anymore, but I honestly give the advice to get a credit card when you're going off to college, mainly because most likely you just recently turned 18, right? So you can get a credit card, but it helps you build your credit, which is super important for the future.
Yeah.
So when it comes time to purchase a home, to purchase a car, like building that credit is really important. But how you use that credit card is probably the most important to be able to build that credit, right? So if you can't pay off the balance every month, then you're going to incur some interest charges and some fees. If you're late making your payment, you're going to have late fees, and then something that you thought cost $20 now becomes costing $30. So really the sale you didn't get. You thought you bought it on sale, but now you've paid interest and fees, and then that didn't help your credit score. Right? So it's about responsible use of that credit card. But I do encourage students who don't have one to have one before they go to college, or at least get one their first year, but use it responsibly. So we have all these technology gadgets, right? So we can set calendar reminders to pay it a few days in advance. Don't wait till the last day. And I know that's a common habit. Sometimes I think students wait to do everything on the last day, right? But you really don't want to be paying your credit card bill the last day in case something doesn't work right and it doesn't go through, because you don't want to incur those excess fees. Yeah. Right.
And it seems like a great idea. I mean, for some student who's typically maybe even just using a parent's credit card to establish their own credit, seems like, yes, that's a great step forward. And you already mentioned, if you can't pay off the balance every month, then you're getting into trouble. What happens if a student is getting into big trouble and now they're pretty far down the road, they're afraid to talk to mom and dad about it or whatever? I mean, what kind of financial dangers do they get into if they really overspend?
Well, just aside from, killing your credit score and perhaps creating some negative feelings in the family, right? That those can all build up. But it is really important to talk to someone. If you really don't want to talk to family, most students on every campus have a navigator or an advisor. Even just talking to someone like that, or even a professor, can guide them to, better steps, what they should do next, and maybe encourage that conversation to happen with the people that can help them. Right. Because the longer you wait, the worse it gets. Right.
And I can imagine consumer debt. On top of, I don't know any student that doesn't have loans. I'm sure the majority have loans. So when you're graduating, and now, or at least looking at graduation, maybe you're going into senior year, you've made some mistakes with the credit card. So now you're graduating with consumer debt and student loan debt. How do you start to get out of that red?
My advice usually is keep living like a student. Right? All students are poor, right? We're all poor, right, when we're a student, because our full-time job is being a student. So our income is usually minimal, right? So you find very frugal ways to live, whether it's having a roommate to share rent costs when you leave. But the longer that you can keep living in that sort of frugal type mindset, then you can take as much of that income as possible and just pay down your debt, starting with the highest interest rate item first. That's usually my advice. So, and you just chip away at it as much as you can. And if you really focused, it's possible to get out of such holes.
So is that how, if somebody's graduating from college now and they have, they're going to start their new job, but we all know entry-level salaries are sometimes, not as glamorous as we expected. How do you start to look at, is there a way to accelerate paying off some of those loans? Or is there a good way that you could recommend where maybe that debt is paid off faster?
I think the thing that works best for most people is automation. And the fact that we have so many technical or technological advances, we can automate most anything, right? So payments. So from the top, set automatic payments to your loans, so that your net paycheck, the amount that gets into the spending account, is already after you've kind of made those payments. And you can make extra payments, right? So every time that, whether it's a student loan or even consumer debt like a credit card bill, you get the bill in the mail, you have a required amount. With a credit card, it'll say minimum payment amount. That's to avoid any kind of fee.
Yeah.
For that, but you're still gonna have interest charges, right? So the pay more than the minimum, right? That's really it. Just pay as much as you can on the highest interest rate thing first.
Okay.
And automate it so that you never get used to having had that money.
Yeah.
Right? If you're paying it down, and then as you see your principal amount owed drop, that gives you motivation to keep doing it.
Yeah.
Right? And then it will pay off faster.
Yeah.
A lot of times we see the young students who graduate, they're also doing side gigs in addition to their regular whatever they've gotten as their first-time job. Just dedicate all of that toward paying off debt or some sort of saving bucket, whether it's savings for retirement or paying down debt. And it's all a balance. You've got to balance life with your financial, like life needs and wants, as well as with the things that you absolutely have to pay, right?
Yeah.
So
with interest rates the way they are, I just know among my peers it was I feel like most people paid the minimum, and we were way too old by the time we were like, we're done paying off our student loans. Is there a shift or should there be a shift in trying to get those paid off earlier? Because then by the time student loans are being paid off, I mean, I had a husband, a house, and some kids.
I still have a student loan I'm paying off, right? So multiple degrees, so I have multiple loans.
Right.
But it really comes down to the bigger picture. Financial planning is really is a broader thing. It's not just one thing. It's not just debt. If you think big picture, the goal is to maximize your overall net worth, right, in the long term. That's a long-term goal.
Yeah.
So I caution about being so focused on short-term decisions, because yes, you might graduate, get married, have a kid, buy a house, and now you've got student loan debt and house debt. So again, it just comes back to looking, okay, which one is highest debt? Let's pay that one off first and just chip away at them. Our current tax law gives you some incentives for certain types of debt over others, right? So student loans have a deduction on your taxes. So do mortgages, although now with a higher standard deduction that becomes a bit irrelevant. So maybe that one you're paying down faster, right, versus the student loan debt. So it comes down to, what is that monthly payment? And can you pay more than the principal or than the required amount? And if you can pay down the principal, then you end up paying it down much faster.
Right. I know I've done stories and we've had conversations before about being wise about choosing not only your college but your major in terms of what you want to go into and how that starting salary is. Is there any formula to follow, or is there any rule of thumb where if you get into the school or you have a certain amount in loans but you're going to make X amount and it might not be a high salary? Is there any way to determine this might not be the school for me, or I need to think about what I'm going into field-wise and that starting salary?
I mean, there's not sort of a magic formula. Every person has multiple factors in their life. So the financial situation of one family might differ from another, and college is an experience, right? There's a lot that you get during that college journey other than just a certificate of your major, right? So for some, the specific institution matters for them. For others, it's just about getting a college degree. But if you're trying to look at numbers, there's with technology and the internet today, you can look up and get an average of what the salary is for any particular job in any particular region, right? And then that might influence you individually to say, oh, maybe I choose this university over another. But I want to caution about that because we tend to see students say, well, I'm going to get this job, it doesn't earn that much, so I'm just going to go to the cheapest school I can. And my advice is really, you want to go to the best school that you can afford, that's going to help you get further and do better with that particular area that you want to study, right? And there's always I always hear this conversation about, should I go to a state school, should I go to a private school? That too isn't always an easy answer, because when we look at financial aid that might be available, there may be more available at a private school than there may be at that state school. It all comes down to, you know, what sometimes there's some very generous donors who've left some scholarship endowments that can help more students study a particular area. Not even school specific. There are lots of scholarships out there for different areas of study if students just apply, right, and sit down and do that work of applying, and you can really reduce the cost of school. But it does take effort, right? You got to put the time into it. So. And
before I let you go, is there a favorite exercise or assignment that you give to your students, or a favorite lesson that you give to your students about financial literacy?
I have so many that I make them
It's hard to choose.
I think, honestly, the budgeting one that I talked about, where I make them kind of track what they spend, everything down to a candy wrapper. Like, I had a candy bar today. Like, write it on your list. I don't care if it was 50 cents, whatever it was, you know, just to become aware. But I do think there's that benefit in a little bit of reflection, self-reflection. You don't even have to have that conversation with your parents or your grandparents, but if there's someone in your life who you think is a good money manager, right, someone you've seen, then I think that's another assignment I typically give, is have a conversation, do an interview, and find out what did they do that made them become either financially responsible, or maybe it's financially successful, whichever term that is. And you can generally learn a lot. And you trust them, right? If you're asking someone that you see that you know has done well, or that you believe they are, you learn all kinds of little tips on either ways to be frugal, ways to save. So much information out there. I usually also encourage students to do a little bit of research, and there are a number of websites they can read up on topics. For example, NerdWallet's a really cool one, written to the college level understanding. Students who read that can understand it. I also encourage students just to take a personal finance class while they're in college. Right? That'll help for once they graduate and kind of go out into the real world.
And a big thank you to Mary Sasmaz with Case Western Reserve University. Hopefully you got some great advice out of that. I know that I figured I should start charting where my spending is going. Thanks again for joining me here on Mom Squad. We'll see you right back here next week.